Imagine, if you will, a world without traffic jams. A world where the fastest thing on your street is a horse having a particularly good day. That was the world just over a century ago. It was a time of clip-clops, not engine roars. A time when long-distance travel meant planning patience and probably a lot of hay. Then, a man with a funny-looking mustache and a stubborn idea decided that the horse had had its day. That man was Henry Ford. He didn't just build a car, he put the entire world on wheels. He took a luxury item for the fabulously wealthy and turned it into a tool for the everyman. It was an idea so brilliant, so utterly world-changing, it was almost simple. This isn't just a story about a car company. Oh no, that would be boring. This is a story about ambition, about genius, and some truly spectacular cock-ups. We're going on a journey that spans more than 100 years, from a dusty workshop in Detroit to gleaming factories all over the globe. It starts with a sputtering, noisy quadricycle and leads somehow to a silent electric pony, the Mustang Mach-E. One company's obsession with nuts, bolts, and production lines fundamentally reshaped how we live, work, and think about distance itself. We'll start at the very beginning. A farm boy who hated farm work but loved to tinker with machines. He battles investors, rivals, and his own stubborn nature. The vision wasn't just about building a car, it was about millions of them, all identical, all affordable. The legendary Model T, so simple you could fix it with a hammer and some strong language. It painted the American landscape black, one affordable, reliable, slightly wobbly car at a time. This was the dawn of a new age. From that simple black car, an empire was born. An empire that built tanks and bombers to help win world wars. An empire that created iconic muscle cars and one that stumbled, fell, and got back up again. So, buckle up. We're about to put the pedal to the metal on a trip through history, and it's going to be one heck of a ride. Henry Ford was born on a farm in Michigan in 1863, and he absolutely loathed it. While other boys were learning the fine art of milking a cow or the profound joys of shoveling manure, young Henry was fascinated by a different kind of power. Not the kind that came from an ox, but the kind that came from steam and gears. He was the sort of boy who, upon being given a watch, would immediately take it apart just to see how it ticked. And unlike most of us, who would be left with a pile of bafflingly small bits, Henry could put it back together again. He was a natural-born tinkerer, a mechanical prodigy in a world still largely run by muscle and sweat. His father, a decent, hard-working farmer, probably looked at his son with a mixture of pride and utter confusion. But Henry's dreams weren't filled with fields of wheat. They were filled with self-propelled machines. He saw the back-breaking labor all around him and thought, there has to be a better way. At 16, he'd had enough of the rural life and left for the big city of Detroit to become an apprentice machinist. The farm had lost a reluctant hand, but the industrial world was about to gain its biggest revolutionary. In Detroit, Ford soaked up knowledge like a sponge. He worked at various shops, learning everything he could about engines. By night, he was a man possessed, tinkering in a small brick shed behind his house on Bagley Avenue. While his neighbors slept, Ford was wrestling with his first creation, the quadricycle. It was a clumsy-looking thing, more like a piece of furniture on bicycle wheels than a car. It had a two-cylinder engine that produced a whopping 4 horsepower, a tiller for steering, and no brakes to speak of. It was noisy, smelly, and probably terrified every horse within a 5-mile radius. But in 1896, it moved, under its own power. The story goes that on a rainy night, after months of toil, Ford realized his creation was too wide to fit through the workshop door. Unfazed, he grabbed an axe and simply hacked away at the door frame until the opening was big enough. That single act tells you everything you need to know about Henry Ford's personality. He wasn't a man to be stopped by a wall or a skeptical investor, or indeed, the entire established order of the world. If something was in his way, he'd find a way through it. even if it meant breaking things. The quadricycle sputtered out into the Detroit night, and the world would never be the same. That first drive in the quadricycle was a triumph, but it didn't exactly make Henry Ford an overnight success. Building one strange, clattering machine in your back garden is one thing. Starting a car company is quite another. To do that, you need money. Lots of it. And in the late 1890s, convincing men in suits to pour their fortunes into a horseless carriage was a tough sell. Ford needed backers, and his first attempt was, to put it mildly, a bit of a disaster. He managed to gather some investors and formed the Detroit Automobile Company in 1899. The problem was, Henry was a perfectionist, a maddening, obsessive perfectionist. Instead of churning out cars to sell, he spent all his time and the company's money tinkering, refining, and redesigning. His investors, who were hoping for a quick return, grew impatient as they watched cash burn with very few cars rolling out the door. After just a year and a half, the whole thing collapsed. The Detroit Automobile Company was bust. Ford was out. Now a lesser man might have given up and gone back to the farm, tail between his legs. But Henry Ford was not a lesser man. He was a stubborn one. To prove his engineering genius and attract new, better investors, he decided to do what any red-blooded American would do: build a ridiculously fast racing car. He and his small team created Sweepstakes, a flat, terrifying-looking racer with a massive engine and not much else. It was a plank of wood with an explosion happening on top of it. In October 1901, Ford challenged Alexander Winton, America's most famous racing driver, to a high-stakes race. Winton was the undisputed champion. Ford was the underdog. But Winton's car started to fail, and Henry, holding on for dear life, thundered past him to victory. He hadn't just won a race, he had won back his reputation. The victory made him a local hero, and more importantly, it made wealthy men take notice once again. Round 2 was about to begin. Flush with the fame from his racing victory, Ford was ready for another go. He quickly found new backers. In 1901, the Henry Ford Company was born. You'd think this would be it. But you'd be wrong. While his new investors were clamoring for a passenger car they could actually sell, Henry was obsessed with building even more powerful racing machines. The boardroom became a battlefield. The tension became unbearable. In March 1902, Henry Ford left his second car company. The investors brought in a new expert, Henry Leland. That company would eventually be renamed after the French explorer who founded Detroit, Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac. Yes, that's right. Henry Ford's second failure became Cadillac, his future arch-rival. So, there he was again. Twice a failure. But Henry Ford's capacity for self-belief was practically infinite. He went back to his racing, convinced it was the key. He built another racer, the legendary 999, a brutal, fire-breathing monster so terrifying that no one, not even Henry, dared to drive it. So he hired a bicycle racer with nerves of steel named Barney Oldfield. He wrestled the 999 to victory after victory, becoming America's first celebrity racing driver and making Ford's name synonymous with speed and power. This time, the strategy worked perfectly. On June 16, 1903, the Ford Motor Company was incorporated. This was the one. The third attempt. With a modest $28,000 in cash, the company set up shop in a converted wagon factory on Mack Avenue in Detroit. The stage was finally set. The dream was about to become a reality. The new Ford Motor Company started not with a revolution, but with a simple, practical car, the Model A, that sold for $850. It wasn't cheap, but it was well built, and crucially, the company was actually selling them and making a profit. Ford was finally a successful automaker, but Henry wasn't satisfied. He didn't want to build cars for the rich, he wanted to build a car for the great multitude. He argued constantly with his business partner, Alexander Malcolmson. Ford eventually bought Malcolmson out, taking complete control of the company's direction. Now, nothing stood in his way. In a secret workshop, Ford and a small team of dedicated engineers began work on his universal car. It had to be light but strong, capable of handling the atrocious rural roads that made up most of America. After years of development, in 1908, they unveiled it. It was called the Model T, but it was brilliant. Its high ground clearance meant it could go almost anywhere a horse could. The Model T was an instant sensation. The company was flooded with orders, far more than they could possibly build. For the first time, ordinary people could think about traveling beyond their own town. The Model T wasn't just a machine, it was a social catalyst. Henry Ford had finally achieved his dream. But in doing so, he had created a new problem. How on earth do you build millions of them? The answer to that question would change the world forever. The old method was painfully slow. Skilled craftsmen gathered around a single chassis. It was like tailoring a custom suit. One Model T took over 12 hours. Ford and engineers obsessed over efficiency. They broke assembly into tiny components. They timed every action with a stopwatch. The breakthrough came from meatpacking. Engineers watched carcasses on an overhead trolley. As carcasses moved, each butcher made one cut. They realized they could do the same in reverse. In 1913, at Highland Park, Ford's team ran their first big experiment. Men slowly dragged it across the floor past a line of workers. Each worker stood in one place and performed one single task. The results were mind-blowing. Assembly time plunged from over 12 hours to just under 6. They knew they were onto something huge. The birth of the moving assembly line. The rope was replaced by a powered, chain-driven conveyor. The factory became an integrated machine. A river of steel flowed through the building. The engine, built on its own line, lowered from an overhead gantry, dropped into the chassis below. By early 1914, 93 minutes. One Model T every 1.5 minutes. This efficiency slashed the Model T price from $825 in 1908 to under $300 by the mid-1920s. This obsession with uniformity led to one of the most famous quotes in automotive history. Any color, so long as it's black. It wasn't a matter of taste, it was a matter of speed. But that rigidity would become Ford's greatest weakness. While Henry kept painting the world black, his rivals were offering something new: choice. While the assembly line was a miracle of production, it created a very human problem. The work was brutal, monotonous, soul-crushingly dull. Imagine standing in the same spot for 8 hours a day, tightening the exact same 3 bolts on every single car that passed you. Workers were not craftsmen anymore. They were cogs in a vast, unfeeling machine. Unsurprisingly, they hated it. The turnover rate at the Highland Park plant was astronomical. It was a revolving door of misery. Henry Ford, ever the pragmatist, knew he had to do something drastic. In January 1914, he made an announcement that sent shockwaves across the globe. He announced Ford was more than doubling the basic wage to a revolutionary $5 day for an 8-hour day. The next day, 10,000 desperate men swarmed the Highland Park gates, hoping to land one of these life-changing jobs. But Henry Ford wasn't acting out of pure generosity. If you paid workers enough, they could afford to buy the very product they made. He was creating his own customers. But it came with some rather large strings attached. To ensure his workers were worthy, he established the Ford Sociological Department, whose job was, essentially, to meddle in the private lives of every single Ford employee. For the thousands of immigrants who worked at Ford, this was a particularly intense experience. It was a powerful, if slightly creepy, symbol of assimilation. Conformity was the price of prosperity. By the mid-1920s, the Model T was starting to look ancient. The Tin Lizzie was left in the dust. Ford's sales plunged. In May 1927, Ford shut factories and laid off tens of thousands for 6 months. The assembly line that had made 15 million identical cars stopped. The giant had stumbled. Ford roared back to life with the Model A. It was everything the T wasn't: stylish, available in multiple colors, and much easier to drive. Then came another stroke of genius: the Ford Flathead V8 engine in 1932. Making a powerful, smooth 8-cylinder engine affordable to the masses for the first time. When America entered World War II, Ford became a key part of the arsenal of democracy. The most incredible feat was the Willow Run factory, churning out one 4-engine heavy bomber every single hour. After the war, the company floundered. But a new Henry was waiting in the wings: Edsel's son, Henry Ford II. He famously hired a team of 10 brilliant former Air Force officers, nicknamed the Whiz Kids, to overhaul the company's chaotic management. In 1964, Ford unleashed its masterstroke, the Mustang. It was an instant cultural phenomenon, a symbol of freedom and fun that defined a generation. But there were also spectacular stumbles. The late 20th and early 21st centuries were a period of intense crisis. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, its rivals were forced to take government bailouts. Ford, in a moment of incredible foresight and guts, chose a different path. Ford to be the only major American automaker to survive without a government bailout. Now, Ford faces its next great existential challenge: the shift to electrification. It put its most sacred name, Mustang, on an all-electric SUV, the Mach-E. The story of Ford is the story of the modern world. It's a tale of a stubborn farm boy who hated hay but loved machines, a man whose relentless vision put humanity on wheels. The world we live in today, with its sprawling suburbs and, yes, its infuriating traffic jams, was shaped in the fires of Ford's factories. It's a story of incredible resilience, a 120-year-old prizefighter that has taken every punch the world could throw at it and is still standing, ready for the next round. Can this old Detroit giant, this titan of the internal combustion engine, truly reinvent itself for an electric, autonomous age? If the last century has taught us anything, it's that you should never, ever count Ford out. The company that put the world on wheels is now trying to figure out how to keep it moving for the next 100 years. It's going to be one hell of a ride.